everything you need to know about To Kill a Mockingbird Chapter 18. So now that we're through Chapter 18, we can talk through it. This is a shorter chapter, but it's pretty key to the case, and it gets a little bit crazy. Now, the chapter starts with Mayella Ewell being called to the stand. Scout observes she looks young and kind of delicate walking up, but once she sits down, Scout can tell she's thick and used to hard work. Hasn't had an easy life. Scout can tell the difference in cleanliness, though, between Mayella and her father. Bob Ewell looked like he had scrubbed to get rid of a lot of the dirt the night before, while Mayella kind of seems to make an effort to stay clean. Mr. Gilmer starts to question her about the night in question, but she struggles to answer. The judge breaks in, asking her to just tell them what happened when she starts crying. Now, the judge tries to get her to calm down, asking what she's afraid of, and she points at Atticus, saying she doesn't want him to do what he did to her father, tricking him and pointing out his left-handedness. The judge tries to be soothing, but he's kind of annoyed, asking her age and telling her that Atticus isn't trying to scare her, but if he was, then the judge would stop him from doing that. He then prompts her to answer the questions and just tell what happened. So her story starts with her father asking her to break apart a shiffer robe, which is basically a dresser, for firewood, and then he goes off into the woods hunting or whatever. She was feeling too weak for the job, so when Tom Robinson came by, she called him up using the N-word and promised him a nickel if he'd do the job for her. He came in behind her supposedly when she went in to get the money. She claims he grabbed her by the neck, cussed at her, and talked trash and repeatedly hit her. She stops and gets choked up, wiping her face with a handkerchief that she's been twisting up in her hands, adding that he threw her to the ground and took advantage of her. Gilmer asked if she tried to fight him off, and she claims she fought like crazy, but the next thing she remembers was her father over her asking who did it. Then she must have fainted because the next thing she knows, the sheriff is helping her to the water bucket. Now, Gilmer clarifies that she fought him ferociously and that he tried to rape her. She answers that he did what he was after and fully took advantage of her. Gilmer wraps up his questions by saying that Big Bad Mr. Finch would have some questions of his own, and the judge reminds him that he should not be prejudicing the witness against the defense lawyer. So Atticus gets up, strolls to the windows, and looks out before making his way to the witness stand. Scout knows he's buying time to think. He assures her that he won't try to scare her, but he just try to get to know her and ask her age again. Now, she repeats that she's 19 and that she already said that to the judge. Now, Atticus, calling her Miss Mayella and ma'am, being really nice, says that his memory isn't what it used to be, so she might have to repeat some of what she said before. She tells him that she won't ask her a single question as long as he's mocking her and making fun of her. Now, when the judge tells her that Atticus is not making fun of her, she says that she thinks that him calling her Miss Mayella and ma'am is to tease her. Atticus walks away to let the judge handle it. Judge Taylor reassures her that Atticus is just being polite, that he's that way to everyone. And Scout wonders what Mayella's life must be like if she can't even recognize common courtesy. Well, we find that out when Atticus resumes questioning. She has 7 brothers and sisters. She's the oldest, and she doesn't even know how long her mother exactly has been dead. And she has 2 to 3 years of schooling only. Scout observes that Atticus's questions are meant to give a picture of the Ewell's life. The welfare checks they get aren't enough to survive, and there's suspicion that the father uses some of it for drinking, as he'd go off into the woods, sometimes for a couple days, and come home sick. Now, when they need shoes, they make them out of old tires they pick out of the dump. Water comes from a spring at the end of the dump. In terms of bathing, everyone has to take care of themselves, and the kids are often sick with colds and other problems. When Atticus asks Mayella about friends, she doesn't even know what he means and thinks he's teasing her again. When Atticus asks if she loves her father, again, she isn't quite sure what he means. Atticus clarifies, asking if he's nice enough and treats her well. She answers that he's tolerable except, but doesn't say except when. And Atticus tries to finish the thought by saying except when he's drinking, but she won't go there. Atticus asks if he's ever harmed her or beaten her, which causes her to first look around. The judge has to prompt her to answer, so she finally says that her father's never harmed her. At this point, Atticus tells her they better get to the case and asks about her asking Tom to bust up the dresser. Atticus asks if she knew Tom well, and she said he passed by her house every day, When asked if this was the first time she asked him inside the gate, she kind of jumps, startled, although Atticus is back by the windows and doesn't see it. Her pause in answering causes him to look and start to ask again, but she says at this point it was the first time. Atticus clarifies, asking that he'd never been invited in before, and if she'd asked him to do jobs before. At first she says she might have, but then she says no, that she couldn't remember any other time she'd asked him to help. Atticus gets specific, asking about how he grabbed her around the neck and cussed at her, caught and choked her, and took advantage. She confirms that that's what she said. He asks if she remembers if he beat her about the face. She hesitates. He has to clarify and ask her 2 more times, and finally, she says she doesn't remember if he hit her in the face, but then quickly changes her mind and says he did. Now, of course, Atticus is like, which is it? To which she says he hit her, but then she says she doesn't recall it because it happened so fast. When the judge tells her not to cry, Atticus says, let her cry. They have time. So Mayella angrily says that she'll answer any questions he wants to ask. Atticus asks her to identify who she said grabbed, hit, choked, and took advantage of her. And he asked Tom Robinson to stand up. We see that Tom is large, but his left arm is a foot shorter and crippled. Jem remarks on this, and Reverend Sykes said that Tom got caught in a machine as a boy. When Mayella says again Tom attacked her, Atticus asks her how. She doesn't know, just that he did it. Atticus asks if she wants to reconsider her testimony, which she doesn't. So Atticus clarifies that he choked her, let go, then hit her right eye with his left fist, his crippled fist. Now, she says now that she ducked and his other fist glanced off of her face. Now, Scout thinks Mayella finally gets it, and Atticus wonders why all of a sudden she's so clear about the details when she just couldn't remember a minute ago if he even hit her or not. He asks why she didn't run. She says she tried, but he knocked her down, that she was screaming. So Atticus then asks her a series of questions, and she doesn't answer a single one. If you're screaming, why didn't any of the other kids come? Where were the other kids? Did she only scream when she saw her father in the window? Did she scream first at her father? Did Tom or her dad beat her up? So at this point, Mayella says she just has something to say, and then she lectures the court that Tom took advantage of her, and if they don't do anything about it, they're horrible cowards, and that Atticus's manners aren't worth squat. She then breaks down crying and won't answer any more questions from either lawyer. The court calls a break, and Scout observes that Atticus looked miserable, like he didn't want to do what he had to do, and that Mayella had been wrecked, although Scout wasn't sure how or why. But she did look at Atticus with boiling hate. Jem sees that Mr. Underwood saw them, but believes he would not tell Atticus. Unlike normal, no one gets up during the recess. To see if they can finish by the end of the day, the judge asks Atticus to call his one witness, and that's where the chapter ends. So what are we supposed to take from this chapter? Since the entire chapter is Mayella's testimony, we're getting the supposed crime from her point of view. What we mostly see is that her point of view is pretty shaky and not trustworthy. At first, her version is fairly straightforward and lacking in detail and matches her father's. But it's when Atticus starts questioning her that her version falls apart. In her pauses and her mind changes and all of these sudden added details that she couldn't first remember, we get the impression she's lying. Her lack of response to Atticus's questions about her siblings not being around when she started screaming and who actually beat her lead us to believe Atticus's interpretation is probably accurate. Yet through the questioning, we get a pretty sad picture of what a broken and stunted person Mayella really is. Her life is horrible and bleak, and she seems bent on wrecking Tom's life as well. Now, it's quite a shock or plot twist when we find out Tom is crippled, and since he can't use his left hand, it's highly unlikely she received her injuries from him. From the last chapter and Atticus's questions this chapter, it makes sense that it was probably her father that beat her. At the end of the chapter, her rant to the jury really captures what this trial comes down to. Her and her father's word against Tom's, white against black. This is the truth Atticus wanted told when he was talking to the group of men in his front yard. These details coming out at the end call serious question to whether there was even a crime. And if there was not a crime, then the trial really becomes about bias and hatred and the South's institutionalized racism that elevates whites and oppresses blacks. This is the problem people had with Atticus taking the case and him taking it seriously, because it confronts the societal structure and exposes it for what it really is, racist and hatred, or full of hate. So any questions? Leave them down below.